Welcome. Shelter Bay Marina is making this video to help you go through the canal safely and we hope enjoyably. The process of going through the canal begins with the ad measurement. Once you arrive in Panama, you request ad measurement. Expect the ad measurer to come aboard your vessel. He's going to measure the vessel. He's going to make sure you have a head. He's going to check your Panama Canal lines. He's going to talk to you about fenders. Once he's finished this process, he's going to give you some paperwork to fill out. One of these pieces of paper is the agreement with the Panama Canal about who's responsible. Once the paperwork is done, the next step is to pay the toll. You can pay the toll at the Citibank in Colon, Citibank in Balboa, or Shelter Bay Marina will pay the toll for you for a modest fee. Once you've paid the toll, it's time to schedule your transit. Pick a date and keep in mind that you can change the date 24 hours before the transit. Otherwise, you pay a fine. 24 hours before departure, make sure you check everything on the boat. Make sure your engine, your fuel, everything is ready to go. It costs you money if you can't go. Make sure you have food for the advisor and water. Communication is the key to making this a safe, happy transit. Begin by inquiring who's going to be with you the day you're going through. It would be nice to know the other boat's name and the captain, and set up a little bit of a plan on how you're going to talk to each other. Make sure you bring up channel 12 and call the canal. Make sure you have good communication with the canal so you know when the advisors arrive. Fenders are required by the canal. You decide how many fenders you have and what type they are. We recommend inflatable ball fenders. Tire fenders represent a big challenge because they hook on things and they mar your boat. Now we're ready to get underway. Time your departure so that you're going to arrive at the pickup point for the advisor half an hour early. We don't recommend dropping the anchor. Simply lie to and wait for the launch to arrive. Keep a sharp lookout. The launch is hard to pick out at night against the lights of Cologne Harbor. You can also maintain a sharp watch on channel 12, which will be your principal communication with the canal. Once the advisor's aboard, the first thing you'll do is check the schedule to make sure nothing's changed since he left the shore. It's really important to establish good communications with the advisor. Take a bit of time to introduce yourself, your crew, and make sure that he understands what your experience level is. He'll be more comfortable about what's going to happen in the canal. Let's talk for a moment about the advisor's instructions. The advisor is going to tell you where he wants you to be in the canal and what he wants your vessel to do. He's not going to tell you how to do it. He doesn't give you helm orders and he doesn't give you rudder orders. What he's trying to do is make sure that you're in the right place in the canal to do the things that need to happen when they need to happen. Right now we're at the junction of the approaches to the new and old locks. The new locks let a lot bigger ships go through the canal. We're going to use the old locks. Today we're going to go up nested. Nesting is something that vessels don't do very often. We're going to take a bit of time to go through the steps. First, be sure you have lines ready to pass. These lines should be normal mooring lines with a loop on the end secured by a bowline. We're going to begin the nesting process by slowing the vessels down. Today it's absolutely calm, so we don't have to worry about the wind, but you would normally want to do this into the wind. Both vessels slow down, but we maintain way so that we can maneuver. As we approach, the breast lines will be passed, one on the stern, one on the bow, and we slowly begin to draw the vessels together while they're moving. This process should be executed with great care, as there are lots of opportunities that people get hurt. Once they're secure, the nest is now formed, and it has to move as one. The captains have to coordinate with each other all of their activities, speed, and any maneuver change of course that they're planning to execute. Once nested, it's important to move out smartly and catch up to the ship in front of us because we don't want to delay the canal's transit. We're approaching the center wall of the chamber now. You'll see two little rowboats there. Those are used on the bigger vessels, as are the locomotives. The gentlemen with the lines in their hands are our line handlers, and those are the folks who are going to be helping us through. We're ready to take the lines from the line handlers now. These lines are a bit dangerous. They are a steel ball covered with manila line. They're the same lines they use in the big ships, so be careful. Signal that you're ready and the lines will come over. Once you have the messenger in hand, secure the end of the canal line with a bowline, pass it through the chalk, and keep it there. We don't want to try and drag that line through the water all the way through the lock. Now we're ready for the sidewall messengers. A little detail I want to point out, those cushions taped to the port lights are there to keep that steel ball from hurting your vessel's delicate parts. We're going to encounter a lot of forces in the lock, and let me explain a little bit. There's always the intention of the water to get back to the ocean, and there's the forces coming up from the bottom of the lock, as well as the forces exerted by the ship's crew ahead of us. Today we won't be bothered by that, but it's an important consideration. The advisor has given the line handlers instructions on placing the lines over the proper bollards on the sidewall. Now we pass the lines up as swiftly as possible to ensure that we don't get out of place in the lock. As soon as the lines are over the top of the bollard, take attention on all four corners. You want to get as much slack out of the line as possible and then secure it. Make sure you let the captain and the advisor know that the lines are secured. As soon as the yachts pass the lock doors, they began to close. Once the advisor hears that all the lines are secure, he's going to advise the lockmaster that we're ready for water. At this point, we're going to help the line handlers. By applying reverse at low speed, we'll keep the bow lines taut and only take up the stern lines as the vessel goes up. Once the chamber is full, the gates will open. The vessel in front of us is going to move forward. Don't do anything until the advisor tells the line handlers to release the lines from the bollards. When that happens, smartly take the lines in, but don't disconnect them from the messengers, as we're going to do the same process we did as we approached the first gate. The line handlers will walk the lines forward until we get to the next set of bollards. We're going to repeat the same process. Lines over the bollards, take up the lines smartly, put the engine in reverse, and ride up comfortably. We're going to repeat the same process in the third chamber. Lines over the bollards, lines taut, engine in reverse, ride up smartly, taking up the stern lines. However, when the gates open, we'll be in Lake Gatun and we'll be beginning our transit across the lake. We're going to remain nested until we're clear of the traffic. Once we break up the nest, we're going to proceed single file across the lake. Remember, keep the red buoys close aboard as we proceed across the lake. As we go through the canal, you can see a lot of additional concrete has been added throughout. Most of this occurred in World War II, where the canal was the most heavily defended place in the world. We had 165,000 troops in Panama to defend the canal. Here we see some post-Panamax ships, or new Panamax. These vessels hold 3 times as many containers as the previous Panamax ship and go about 20 knots. This view shows the Smithsonian Institute's Tropical Research Station on Barrio Colorado Island. It's been here for over 100 years, doing research on everything that moves on Barrio Colorado Island. Having followed the red buoys dutifully, we're now coming up on the dredging division. The canal generally has 2 or 3 dredging operations going just to keep the canal in condition. We saw one dredge earlier and we'll see another one a bit further down the line. The large crane in this view was built in Germany before World War II. It's used to lift the lock gates. The vessel we just passed on the right-hand side is a canal tour boat. It's been here for almost 100 years as well. It used to be a yacht in New England. It's tied to a buoy that's used for mooring yachts when they can't proceed to the Pedro Miguel yacht. We're now at the beginning of the Culebra cut. The dredge on our right is a suction dredge. You can see the day shapes on the side of the vessel. We're now headed down the Culebra cut at 8.5 knots, making good speed to keep ahead of the vessel that we go down with because we go into the lock first. The cut's much easier to navigate these days. They took several turns out in order to make it wide enough for the big ships. Coming up is the Centennial Bridge, only the second bridge across the Panama Canal. We're arriving at Pedro Miguel. We've managed to stay ahead of the ship that we're going down with, so it's an us first into the chamber. We're going to go down sidewall in the Pedro Miguel lock. It's my favorite method for going down. It's very easy, and as you can see, it's always easier going down than going up. We're going to be going down sidewall, my favorite method. This is an easier process as it requires only one set of line handlers. In the process of going through the canal, it's very likely that you'll be assigned to go alongside a canal vessel, either a tug or a workboat. They will do all the line handling. All you have to do is make up and ride up and down. Once we have our line secured, our partner vessel is going to come up and make up alongside of us, using just the breast lines in this case, because there isn't any reason for the boat to be moving at the same time we're moving. As you can see, there's not as much turbulence going down. The process is simple. Just take up the lines as the boat rises. As the doors open, our partner vessel will cast off and we will both head smartly across Miraflores lakes to get to the lock before our partner vessel. For the Miraflores locks, we're going to repeat the nesting process. Remember the key points. Keep the boats parallel. Make up the breast lines first. Bring the boats together. Proceed smartly into the lock to the position. As we head into Miraflores, I want to reiterate one important thing. It's important to get the stern lines over first. Make sure they're secured, then put the bow lines over. Here we go in Miraflores. We've gone through the line handling drill and we're moving down toward the end of the lock. The Miraflores Observatory is on the left-hand side here, and as you can see, it's impressive. It houses a museum, which is very interesting, and I would recommend it to everyone. The Miraflores locks present the greatest challenge to the yacht going through the canal. This is due to the mixing of the water in the second chamber. You have fresh and salt water mixing. This produces a current toward the sea, which can be as much as 2.5, 3 knots. Very important. Exacerbated by the wind, which is channeled down the canal at this time of day. We're fortunate today, there is no wind, and so our process is going to be somewhat easier. As we proceed down the lock, our captains are keeping the boats exactly where they need to be. Your advisor will be paying close attention to the placement of the stern lines, as we want to get these over as quickly as possible and stop the boat's forward motion. As we were moving down the chamber, you could see the practice area for the line handlers, 2 poles and a target. They have to be able to throw the line over the top of the poles and hit the target. That's to service the big vessels. As we go down, we're going to keep the engine going ahead. This will keep the stern lines taut and we only take up the bow lines. As we go down, we want to be sure and keep the bow lines taut. There's a good deal of water moving in the lock and we want to maintain our position in the center of the chamber. We had a short ride down today as it's high tide on the Pacific and we don't get the extra 18 feet of drop. As we cross the sill, there's a little bit of current, but that should not present a problem for these 2 vessels. We're coming up on Balboa Harbor here. It's impressive. The 2 terminals here handle over 1.5 million containers a year. We're now coming up on the Bridge of the Americas. Finished in the early 1960s, it presents the only air draft issue on the canal. There are a few yachts in the world that need to coordinate their passage at low tide. We're now arriving at the world-famous Balboa Yacht Club. Today we're only going to use it as a meeting point to drop off our advisors and our lines and buoys. The departure of your advisor marks the end of your Panama Canal transit. We're going to continue a little bit further today because there are a few things we'd like to point out to you about the canal. As we leave the Balboa Yacht Club today, we're going to proceed inside the green buoys. We can do this at high tide. We couldn't do it at low tide. If we were at low tide, we'd have to cross the canal, follow the red buoys until we got to Goleta and cross the canal again to get into our berthing. As we make the turn into La Playita, we're passing the Goleta Island Smithsonian Aquarium. Interesting place with lots of sea life from both oceans. Much like Shelter Bay Marina, La Playita is a modern marina with concrete docks, electricity, and water. As we've had a chance to observe, this is a relatively simple process that depends on a little bit of preparation and good execution. A couple of points to remember. Make sure that everything is working 24 hours before you're ready to go. Make sure you set up communications, hopefully with the yachts that are going with you, certainly with the canal. Follow the instructions that the advisor gives you. He's not going to tell you how to maneuver your vessel, but he is in charge of getting you through the canal on time. Well, as Bugs Bunny would say, that's all, folks.